it's just like the law. It's just moved to a massive place. They were players of the people. That's where the Invisible Dog League came from.
Hello, welcome along to the latest edition of Tungsten Talk, where this time around we're talking about the roles of brands and identity within the sport of darts, something which is very much a 21st century issue across all sports and across all walks of life, really, if the truth be told. Talking about characters, they don't come much bigger, much better than Scotty Dog Mitchell. First of all, I want to talk about how you came across with, I know your nickname, I suppose, probably speaks for itself, but how you created your identity as a player, because you're someone that was very synonymous with your pink shirts, with obviously the famous walk-on where you had the Invisible League. Where did all that initially come from?
It was a weird one, really. I never really chose it myself. There was varying reasons why it all fitted together. I used to play football for my local football club, and I used to wear pink cycle shorts, so I qualified for a UK Open. And when the guy said, when you said you played darts, we didn't realise you played darts. So I go the following year to be the secretary of the football club, the same as I always have. And they presented me with a pink and black shirt and said, phone this guy, here's your first sponsor. And so the pink and black shirt became a thing. So I kind of then wore that into my first room that I played one of the BDO tournaments. And a lady walked up to me and said, I love what you're doing. This was about 2006, 2007. And that was designed by Sally Haynes. And she said, yeah, I want to sponsor you. And I said, I'm pretty rubbish, to be honest. I'm not very good. And she said, you're brave enough to come in here with that pink and black shirt. I think we can build a gimmick off of that. She said, you need a nickname. And my mum used to call me Scotty Dog when I was in trouble. And one night I hit a 180 at a Super League. And my mate, Rich Hasluck, said, great dart, Scotty Dog. And it kind of just stuck, so Scotty Dog stayed with me. So, it was really not anything to do with me. Even the pink stuff, it was more to do with my mates at the football club.
So then when you started making it on tour, making it on circuit, and obviously beginning to appear at lakesides and tournaments like that, was the image something that you looked at, or were you somebody that just went and played darts and everything kind of looked after itself?
We realised really early that, you know, there were other players with all these sort of images and nicknames and things that worked, and so I kind of had to do very much similar the same. I thought it was the done thing, so that's why it sort of kind of came and stuck. And as I got better and better, and the kind of pink thing, I mean, pink, not even the girls were wearing pink when I was in a room first with a pink and black shirt. And you have to go back to the early 80s to see anybody in a pink and black shirt, and that was Bobby George. He was wearing like racing silks and stuff in pink and black. So I thought I was the first one to do it, but that wasn't to be.
I suppose Bobby George was a game changer in many ways in terms of the sport. He's the first player to have a walk-on. He walked onto a track, didn't he? Before that became something that the PDC used when they started doing televised tournaments. And you had the bling, you had all the jewellery, you had the shirts. I suppose in terms of taking darts from a sport where everyone wore plain coloured shirts, everyone was kind of, you could say everybody was kind of the same, kind of a bit more uniform. Bobby kind of broke that cord, so to speak.
I think he was probably the first one that brought showmanship to darts. You know, it was coming on with the candelabra and everything, which was a massive fire hazard in the 80s. And as he got older, that got stopped and turned into little flicker lights. But that's where I got my idea from for the dog lead in the Invisible Dog. Varying comedians over the years had Invisible Dog leads on stage, and I thought, wow, what a great gimmick. And if I make the lead pink and make it diamond studded, and so because Bobby was carrying something, I thought that maybe that was the thing that I should be doing. So that's where the Invisible Dog lead came from.
And it made Bobby a lot of money. The first darts millionaire, and people actually forget that. Obviously, Eric Britta being the most successful player at that time, but Bobby brought in numbers, brought in viewers, brought in sponsors that possibly other players couldn't have bought in because of what he did. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, Eric brought players in with his flamboyancy and his crafty Cockney nickname, and, you know, embracing where he was from. So all the people loved him where he was from. And I think Bobby embraced more of an audience with the fact that he came on with the cape and the candelabra, and he felt that he was the people's champion. He was the person of the people, and it didn't matter back then whether you were a kid growing up watching him, you liked Bobby George, or you were an old granny sat in your chair and you only watched darts twice a year. You still love Bobby George. It was a gimmick that worked right across the ages and very clever on him.
And when the exhibition circuit started properly in the 1980s, he was kind of the first player that made real inroads on that, made big money. Probably made more money from the exhibition circuit than he probably did on tour, particularly towards the end of the 80s when such issues came in. And I suppose he tread the path for players in the modern day. We see the likes of Luke Humphreys, Michael Van Gogh, nowadays Luke Littler, really partake in that exhibition tour and that exhibition circuit. And I suppose you've got to have that personality and you've got to have that demeanour if you're going to be successful. And if you are, there's a lot of money to be had.
Yeah, there is. I mean, but you don't have to be a flamboyant character to be that person. So, I mean, you take sort of John Lowe and being stone-faced and being dead straight-laced, and that's what made him famous. But I think Bobby was the one that started it because big companies then wanted to back Bobby. And nowadays, it's very different. It's corporate events rather than going into pubs and clubs and kind of selling your wares and like Bobby did and playing and having to do that. Now it's more corporate events. They're bigger functions. They're 2,000 deep, some of these. And I was hearing of an exhibition last week in Germany. It was 12,000 at it. So, from where it developed from 50 to 100 in a pub, and it's just moved to a massive place because darts has moved to a massive place.
For some people that may not know exactly what is an exhibition or what type of events get put on, you're very popular on that circuit yourself. First of all, what kind of events are there and what different types of events are there to that circuit?
So to be on the exhibition circuit, that type of thing, there are sort of like exhibitions in pubs and clubs where you can have 50 and 60 up to 150 depending on the size of the club. You go along as a player and pay 10 or 12 players and attempt to do things like double and finish on bullseyes and have a flamboyant evening, little Q&A at the end. There are other ones where you go and handing out trophies and play less players, maybe the winners of the leagues and stuff, in a similar sort of thing in a pub or a club. And nowadays you've got these big ones in sort of international centres and big sort of concert halls, and you can have 6 or 8 players and they tend to play off against one another. Not so much involving the crowd. Maybe 1 or 2 will come out and play you with if they win some sort of prize to be able to do it and play the stars. But you're sort of more up on stage and playing against each other to show your wares, really.
So when a promoter contacts you for an event like that, what exactly do they want from the player throughout the course of an evening?
They just want your image rights. They just want you as your image and what everybody sees on the TV. So sometimes there's meet and greets before the event's open, sort of 2 hours before, and signing bits and pieces for people so that they go home with their bits of memorabilia and things signed. Other times it's just to go to a pub and promote something maybe that the promoter is looking to have promoted in a certain place. It can vary. It really does vary. And I think the fact that it varies keeps it all interesting.
Which is why I suppose image is so important when we're talking about players. And I just want to go back to, before we talk about some of the more modern players and the players at the top end of the piece, I want to go back to your time when you really were at the top of the BDO circuit, because you were there with some big characters, the likes of Tony O'Shea, the likes of Martin Adams, the likes of Dal Fitton. And they had that circuit pretty much on lock, where they were going to Germany, they were going to the Netherlands and things like that. What do you think they did that made them such household names?
Those guys were, well, firstly, you have to be a great player and you've got to win stuff and be seen winning stuff. Everybody loves a winner. So that's the first thing you got to do. Then their images were, they were players of the people. Tony, Darryl, Robbo, Gary Robson, they were all, they understood what their crowd was and where their people were. So even when they sort of finished, you see them just mingling with the people. They were the first ones to really embrace the people and make everybody realise that without these crowds watching us, we're nothing. We're table tennis players, and I don't mean that in any disrespect to table tennis players, but who knows a table tennis player these days? You don't, because they're not seen on TV. So we have to push the game. We have a responsibility to push the game to the very limits, and like you say, back in those days it was getting yourself out there, and there's no better places to go to get yourself out there, play on floor tournaments on the floor with the people and be with the people.
Well, let's talk about players that have very much made their household name through what they've done in terms of image. I suppose the first player you think of is Peter Wright, the snakebite image, the Mohican hair, the trousers which change game on game. He's a player that, with the success that he's had, has built a real identity towards the game. If you ask people in the street, name a darts player, even if they don't know Peter Wright's name, they'll say, what about the guy with the Mohican?
Yeah, absolutely. I think recognisability. Sometimes they don't actually know your name, but they'll know the guy with a certain look. So, Peter Wright was known as the guy with the Mohican, and that creates a brand, which then becomes... He becomes popular, then he starts selling shirts, and with Peter, there's trousers from things, and then all of a sudden, all his merchandise, like cases, darts, and it all just goes on. So the branding of a player is really, really important. I mean, we can go back to Andy Forden being the Viking. He was one of the most recognised players in the world of darts, and the Viking was the thing. I'm not so sure that that's what he chose, but it worked for him. And he's, like Peter Wright, it was probably one of the most recognisable dart players in the world at one time. We had Barney, he was doing the orange thing and the Barney Army stuff. So, and you could buy Barney Army shirts, darts, slippers, you name it, you could get it, because Raymond became that popular in Holland, and even back as far as Les Wallace. Wearing the Scotland rugby shirt and the kilts, he was selling those. They were selling those rugby shirts. They couldn't get enough of them when Les was world champion. So it's not something that's come around all of a sudden. It like you say, it started in Bobby's day, and you're seeing player after player through the generations do a similar sort of thing. And I think it's attracted an audience and to the game, and fans can then attach. If you're Scottish, you attach yourself to something Scottish about a player. Gary Anderson with his tartan on his sleeve. Just all sorts of things that you can do as a player to try and make the fans sort of like endure you more than the next player.
But there's also players that have done it the other way around, where they tried to make their name by being the pantomime villain. There's two names that really do stick to mind. Actually three that stick to mind. You got Peter Manley, Gerwyn Price, and our good friend and colleague Paul Nicholson. All pantomime villains in different ways, but they're probably three of the most recognisable players, particularly of the last 20 years.
Yeah, Peter Manley came to the pink after me, so I'd like to just say that at the moment. But no, I'm only joking. Peter found that he was getting booed a lot, didn't he, up on stage? So he turned it into something, coming on with earmuffs, and it's entertainment. You've got to entertain. If you're doing an exhibition, you're being paid to go and entertain punters that want to see something special from dart players. So when you're playing in these exhibitions, you entertain. And so for Peter, it was very difficult to be the pantomime villain. He loved being the pantomime villain. There's no two ways about that. And there are varying ways in which he enabled that, whether it was playing up another player on TV. But you just know as an opposition player that it's coming, and he was great at that. Gerwyn Price, I'm not sure Gezi has actually asked to be the pantomime villain. I think maybe he spoke honestly, like he is an honest Welshman, and some people didn't like the answer. So that probably came bestowed on him, I think, more than him developing it. And, of course, when we got Paul Nicholson, who, he was, comes on saluting to the crowd. He was the big bad boy, wasn't he? And in the interview saying what he needed to say and tried to develop the bad boy image. But as you and I both know, he's soft as a kitten. And that just kind of didn't work for him in the end, because he's just too nice a guy.
And I suppose that image also, when you look at things like the Premier League, which obviously there's less spaces now, 8 places compared to the 10 before, and you look at the vast quality of players that there is, you look at players that probably in the world's top 20 that could easily qualify for the Premier League based on their performances, based on how they've done in major events. But it feels like now more than ever, with the changing landscape of the sport, that, look, if you're winning things left, right and centre, regardless of who you are, you're probably going to get in. But particularly when you're looking at position 7 and positions 8, and it's very, very tight, it's probably your personality, probably your brand, and probably the people that you can attach to the game that will probably get you that nod. Because
the Premier League isn't like a ranked event, it is its own entity. It is its own brand in itself, the Premier League. So that means that the players that you put on it, one, have got to be very good, and two, they need to be very well known by the people that are coming to watch. So that's why you see that most of the guys in the Premier League have some sort of brand or another. But then I think everybody that's inside that top 16 probably has developed that by then, because they've been doing exhibitions, demos, all over the world. And so they're there and they're playing extremely well. So that's what gets you in.
Do you think it's something that's demanded by, with the top players, by managers, by people associated with them, some kind of image, even if it's not particularly themselves, whether it's an identity on a shirt, whether it's an identity in terms of a song, that it's almost a case of it has to happen. It has to happen now.
Yeah, I mean, there are players that don't have a massive sort of a presence, but they'll wear a certain colour shirt all the time. Chizzy is the one. He made yellow kind of the first one out there wearing yellow. So he worked that out pretty quickly. And I just think there are varying ways of expressing yourself because everybody's different. Some really are exceedingly flamboyant and some are a little bit within themselves and uncomfortable with it. But the bottom line is you have to have some sort of brand if you're a dart player. It's just like the law.
And I suppose social media as well, which I suppose asking somebody in their 50s, I don't know whether this is the perfect question to ask or not, but I apologise. But I suppose that's such a key component as well. I mean, you look at the numbers that Luke Little attracts to his Instagram page. You look at some of the numbers that some of the other top players can get. I suppose Stephen Bunting is a perfect example of this, of a player that's used social media to his advantage. And if you look at a night and you look at a session and you look at players that people want to watch, Stephen Bunting now is probably at the top of that list.
Yeah, well, obviously, professional dart players, once they're pros, they get a bit of time to kill. And they're all using social media as a way to kill time now and promote their own brand. So they're doing various things at home, varying dart tricks, varying this is how to practice, little bits of helping out, little bits of coaching. And people are attaching themselves to these players via social media. And when you do that via social media, these players these people and fans that have probably never really met you get to know you without having to meet you. And so then they attach themselves to you. So social media it's been around for about 20 years, but I think it's been more prominent in the last 10 it's a really big thing now, social media. And it's the best way, it's as good as way of promoting yourself as walking out with a dog on an invisible dog lead.
If you had your time again, would you change anything about your image?
No, not at all. I had a few complaints at the start when I was coming out with the invisible dog lead, and then I put a dog in it, and they didn't like that either. So, and it's people close to you; they know you as a person and your temperament, and for me, they felt that the dog lead was compromising my game. So we, after a couple of years, sort of knocked it on the head, but it didn't help that I wasn't winning first round games anywhere. So I don't think it was to do with the lead. The lead was a great thing for me. I think that it stopped me thinking about the game before the game. I was thinking about the walk on and enjoying the walk on. And some say that kind of puts you off, and some say that for me it was a way of hiding away and having something else to think about before I threw a dart.
Lead you kept losing.
The leader kept losing.
Well, Scott, thank you. Thank you for your company as well. We'll see you next time for the next edition of the Tungsten Talk.
The plan was if nothing wasn't go to plan, we would have just went back to the lives that we had. Oh, you're running around like a madman, and never seen you so happy. I was like, what? I got back to the room and I was so furious. I was like, how does this, oh mate, I wasn't happy. She goes, you wouldn't be ready for it. And I was like, what? Hurt me a little. No, that's really early for a lot of people, isn't it? 9 a.m. No, you know what I mean? I didn't grab any of Kyle's stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I'm sure there's a lot of people actually wondering what your handicap is in golf, if you want to.
oh, there we go.
Sometimes I feel like I get more lucky if I wear my lucky trousers.
Yeah, I was gaining like 10,000 subs a month in lockdown.
I got picked on for being different, but when I played darts, I was allowed to be me.
Like, oh, you're running around like a madman, and never seen you so happy. I was like, what?
I did actually give him a little bit of advice. Can you remember what I said, Mason?
So stop moving your body.
So stop missing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to actually. I'll put it there later. I'll end up pulling it off the wall. I told you.